How much are you going to save? How much are you going to invest?
Wealth is the luxury of choice.
Yes, it is.
It is the luxury of being able to walk away from the business when you want to. It takes time to position you to have those choices. Most entrepreneurs never take a step back to really dream and ask themselves, what do I want my life to look like? Over time, we need to start to diversify away from the business.
Yep.
It's not okay to be living and dying by business performance 30, 40 years
Amen.
into business ownership.
Welcome to the Jasmine Star Show. Just before the cameras turned on, we realized that somewhere behind the scenes, we've calculated the archive, and this is episode 620. And I couldn't be more excited and honored to have a conversation about my favorite thing, money. Today, we're gonna be having a conversation around the differences between making money, AKA riches, and turning it into wealth, the differences between how we look at money and the potential for it, and how to strategically use your money to build something that's bigger than you, that gives you options, that allows you to step into the things that you want to when you want to do it. And I'm speaking this as like a first person narrative. I had a conversation with our guest today and we immediately hopped on. We made an introduction. It took us a couple months to get together. And the minute we got onto the Zoom call, within 5 minutes, I was about to like braid her hair, write KIT in her yearbook, send her a friendship bracelet and say like, pack me up in your bags. We're gonna be friends for life. I was almost this close to harpooning her and said, I will put you in my pocket. You cannot leave me for the rest of my life. And then all of a sudden I decided instead to ask her on my podcast and share her brilliance with you. Welcome to the show, Kaitlyn Carlson.
Thank you.
I'm so happy you're here.
That was quite the introduction.
Well, I mean, it would be quite the introduction if it wasn't entirely true because now it's just a series of facts.
Yes.
You're incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And let's keep the main thing. I love when people have optionality. And optionality was explained to me as you're not forced to do something, you get to choose to do something. But so many of us are forced into doing something because we don't have options. We go to the job that we know, we stay in the house that we know, we date the same person that we know. And a tool that I've learned as I've gotten older and as my business has gotten bigger is that optionality comes when we have made strategic decisions at one point in our life to pursue a different result. One example would be I didn't start with money. I didn't grow up with money. I created a business that slowly over time, like my dream was, if I could make $10,000 a month, my life would change. And then it turned into, if I could make $100,000 a month, my life would change. If we did $1 million in a year, my life would change. If we did $1 million in a month. And then with every subsequent milestone, it didn't ever seem like enough. It would just seem like I had to work more to get more. And then I meet people like you who open my mind and say, hey, Jasmine, it seems like you're climbing a ladder and you're acquiring stuff and your lifestyle gets nicer and the cars you get nicer and the trips get nicer, but are you working to stay on the treadmill? And you and I had a conversation and that's where I want to start this conversation. And that is, first things first, somebody's watching. What is your belief around money and turning it into wealth? And how does somebody immediately, they're watching right now and they're listening right now. They're like, I'm not sure I want to listen. Let's give them a little amuse-bouche around what they can expect.
Okay. The example that comes to mind immediately is the Range Rover. So when I started Theory and I first started getting into the online space, for some reason, the big thing was everybody wanted a Range Rover. And I remember giving this example that if you had a great launch and you made $100,000 and you really wanted a Range Rover, you took that $100,000 to the car dealership, you bought the Range Rover. Right then and there, you would end the life of that dollar. If you took that same $100,000, invested it in a portfolio, and used the income off of that portfolio to pay the finance payments for that Range Rover, you could end up buying Range Rovers for life, rather than just buying that one Range Rover. That regenerative framework is the bedrock of wealth creation. And that is not something that is taught to us in our education system, but it is vital to understanding how, just like the soil, if you give to the soil gives back to you. It's the same thing with money.
Okay. So what I heard was, I'm going to buy Range Rovers the rest of my life because of the conversations that I had with you. Thank you. But at the same time, in all seriousness, I started my business and I started my career not ever really knowing what it could turn into. And so I think that I became very much like a statistic of the things that you talk about. So I come from a first generation family. We didn't have much at all. And so when you come into money, it's a language that nobody in my lineage has ever spoken. And so you're kind of like self-servicing, like, what do I do with money? How do I invest money? And I think that if I look back and I would say, if I was kind to myself, good job, you did the best you could with what you had. But generally, there was so many lagging points. So what I want to do is I want to have a conversation around wherever somebody is right now, whatever age they are. If you are making money in your business, not I'm trying to get it off the ground. This is for somebody who has a little bit of money in their business. What are the 3 common mistakes and I want to go through? So a lot of people listening, we have a 6-figure founder, 7-figure founder, 8-figure founder. It's like, what are the common mistakes that people who are building that upper 6-figure life, what are those 3 common mistakes? 7-figure, what are those 3 common mistakes? And 8-figure, because you work with this wide gamut, mostly 7 and 8, but the gamut of like, how do we get past that next thing and build towards optionality?
So what you're describing is the fact that you're not operating off of a holistic vision, right? It's so entrepreneurs especially, but everybody, most people live their life putting one foot in front of the other, right? And not really looking up. The important thing that we need to do is take a step back and think about, what do I want my life to look like? When I am lying on my deathbed, I want to be thinking, wow, that was beautiful. I did everything I came here to do. And I did it my way. So often we're so busy that we never take the time to step back and ask what we really want our life to look like. So we need to start with that. And the greatest thing about that exercise is that it's free and you can do it at any time. And there's so much information that lives in that vision. And so when I describe the wealth creation journey, I often describe it like we're going to be hiking and descending a mountain together over the course of your lifetime. In order to go on that journey together, we need to answer 3 questions. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? And how do we want to get there? No matter where you are, whether you're at 6, 7, or 8 figures, those are the basic questions that everybody should be asking. So where are we now? From a wealth perspective, we need to set up base camp, right? And figure out like, where are we starting from? So in terms of wealth, that's figuring out what is my net worth statement? What are my assets minus my liabilities? That's going to give me my net worth. The second piece is cash flow. What does it cost for me to live my lifestyle? Is it $10,000 a month? Is it $20,000 a month? Is it $40,000 a month? I can tell you 99% of people come into us not really knowing what the answer is to that question.
And I want to pause here just for a point of clarification is like the vast majority of people who are coming to you already have 7 and 8-figure businesses. So you're saying that 90% of these people who've built these massive, successful, statistically near dang impossible businesses don't know what the monthly expenses are.
Yes.
And so if somebody's listening and they're probably like, well, I'm not sure I know what mine are. First step, what do they do?
Go to your credit card statements. Look at, there's actually a great app called Monarch. Monarch is so eye-opening. Just link your credit cards, link your checking account, and look at what is that total coming out to. I am even guilty of this. As you know, I have 3 kids under 5. I thought we were living off of $16,000 a month, but we had 2 more kids since the last time I did that exercise. We were actually living off of $22,000 a month. But life is moving so fast, right? Like I'm changing diapers, I got to get them into daycare, I'm running the business, like life moves quickly. And so I even had to come back into integrity with taking the time to be like, wait, what are we spending a month? Because we've had 2 more kids, right? So taking the time to actually like sit down and figure out what does it cost us to live our lifestyle and what are we spending money on? And are we spending money in alignment with our values or are we filling voids?
Ooh, okay. Story time. You had mentioned Monarch, and I love that. I love it. I did here again. It's my parents balanced a checkbook. And I remember as a child being at a financial planning seminar for my parents, and they were very much in debt, and they made people who were in debt stand up and cut their credit cards in front of like a glass container. So I saw my parents cut their credit cards, and then they lived in cash in envelopes, and they would put out what they pay for rent and what they pay for gas. And if you went through your gas money in the envelope, then we were taking the bus. Like it was that gnarly. So here I am, years, decades later, and it's 2022, and my husband and I sit down with a journal, very much like this, and we sat down, and we don't use credit cards just generally. So we sat down with our bank statements, him on his laptop, me on my laptop. It's a Friday. We're supposed to go to date night. Okay, this is not the precursor to a good date, let me just tell you. So we sit down and we're going through everything, cataloging everything manually by hand, Kaitlyn. And we did it for the previous 3 months, 3 completed months. And what we realized was that we were overspending in some categories that were crazy. Food, expenditures, lifestyle, just to the wind, 2 sheets to the wind. And that to me was the biggest eye-opening thing, because I had realized that I was spending in a void. Whenever I felt like there wasn't enough, story I told myself is like, I'm gonna shop. I'm gonna fill it. And if I go back to my childhood, it was like, oh, we couldn't have that. So then now I just like shop, I buy, I do all the things. And that was like a big turning point. And so just kind of wanted to share that, because if somebody's looking right now and they're like, oh, Monarch feels intimidating, or there's this, it's like, if you keep your head in the sand, it will stay in the sand. And having a conversation with you, it's just been like a total up level for me, and really having to go deep. It's like, how much are you going to save? How much are you going to invest? So the 3 questions that you had asked, where are we now? Where do we want to go from here? And how do we get there? That is for the 6-figure founder, the 7-figure founder, and the 8-figure founder. So as somebody is getting a successful business, what are the common mistakes when they're coming to you? And you said 90% of the people don't know how much they're spending on a monthly basis. That's one mistake. What are other ones that we can like hold a magnifying glass to ourselves?
Another one is letting time pass and saying, I'll get to that. I'll get to that. And just thinking, one of the biggest things that I see is people say like, well, I just don't have money to invest. Well, you're not going to have money to invest if you don't go through this exercise and find out what is that number. What is my financial freedom number? What is the amount that I need to?
So just to make sure we're on the same page, when you say, what's my financial freedom number? That's a language that was really foreign to me. When you say, what's my financial freedom number? What do you mean?
Great question. So I did this when Theory was making $0.
Hold on, we should talk about Theory. I'm a professional podcast host. Let's talk about Theory. We're going to get to Theory, like the business of your business, but let's set the context of why you're a gangster.
Oh, I'm a gangster. So my background is in private wealth management. So I worked with the ultra high net worth families in this country I've been in finance for 15 years, wealth management for 10. I was one of the youngest private wealth advisors at UBS Financial Services. And during that time, there were 2 things that I did not see while I was there. I worked with over 300 clients. Not one of them was a woman. The other thing that I didn't see before I was in private wealth, I was in Wealth Management Americas. So you're working with just everyday Americans trying to retire. Over and over and over again, I would see business owners come in and I would be having to give them bad news, whether they had to work another 20 years or double the value of their business. Or in some cases, like triggered by a health event, I'd be telling them, I'm sorry, you're used to living off of 400,000, but you're only going to be able to live off of 90. And I kept having this conversation over and over and over again. And I was like, why is this happening? And when I realized it was because of the compensation model. So the traditional wealth management model is called an assets under management model, meaning that, Jasmine, if you give me $1 million, I charge you 1%. I make $10,000 a year off of your $1 million. Your money grows with the markets. My income grows. It's a very lucrative model, and you don't feel it because I take the fee directly from the portfolio. So that model neglects business owners because most business owners don't have lump sums of liquidity sitting around until they have an exit. Well, 8 out of 10 entrepreneurs never exit. So that model severely underserves the business owner demographic. And I wanted to do something about that. I wanted to empower women, and I wanted to give business owners access to the service and strategy and support I was giving $100 million clients. Because I knew these are ambitious people. They just don't have access to the support. So I created Theory on 2 words. I wanted every client to have an advocate and a protector. And so with Theory, I had to think very differently about the comp model. So we run a flat monthly retainer, and we specialize in working with predominantly 7- and 8-figure female entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you for that amazing clarification. So now that brings us to the point of 90% of the people who come in, very successful, atypical statistically atypical level entrepreneur. They have what it takes. They just don't know the pieces that come together. So 90% of them don't know how much they make in a month. And then they don't know what their financial freedom number is. And when you describe financial freedom, what is that?
So this is where we get to that second question. Where are we going? Most entrepreneurs never take a step back to really dream and ask themselves, like, what do I want my life to look like? Because the business, there's usually so much going on with the business and you're so focused on growth that it's that hamster wheel, right? It's like there's a fire. It feels like a really good excuse to just focus on the short term and just like revenue this year. But at the end of the day, like, your life is for you to live. What do you want your life to look like? And I like to say work optional, because everyone that comes to us loves what they do for a living. But going back to what you were saying about having options, wealth is the luxury of choice.
Yes, it is.
It is
Say that again.
Wealth is the luxury of choice. It is the luxury of being able to walk away from the business when you want to, for whatever reason. You want to take a sabbatical, you want to retire, you want to exit. It takes time to position you to have those choices. So we need to get really clear on, when do you want work to become optional versus necessary? But what are other goals?
So like, let's break this down. Like, this is just what I do. I feel like I'm the voice of the audience because I'm a special snowflake. I don't understand a lot of things at first go around. So work optional. If I say, okay, for the sake of this conversation, I'm 25 years old and I want to stop working when I'm 35. I know people are like, I know I'm not 25. Okay, let me just live. So I want to stop working when I'm 35. Then you would say you have 10 years to save up a certain amount of money so that at 35, should you decide to retire or not, you have that option. So work optional is, I've decided I would like to. Now, do people come in and say, I want it's work optional when I make this amount, or is it work optional by an age? What do you see the most of?
It's a combination.
Okay.
So because when you become work optional, it means that your assets have replaced your need to work. So the income that you're receiving from your assets have replaced your need to run a company or have any sort of income, because the income that's being generated from your assets is replacing your need to work.
Got it.
So if you are a 25-year-old and you're coming to me and you're saying, I want to be work optional by age 35, my first question to you is, well, how much do you spend a month? Because at the very least, you're going to want a continuation of lifestyle, right? So if you spend $20,000 a month, we're going to run the numbers for, okay, how can Jasmine be work optional by age 35, spending $20,000 a month? That's going to come back and be a certain portfolio size. So let's say it's $4 million. Okay, Jasmine has 10 years to accumulate a $4 million portfolio. Is she going to do that through saving and investing regularly? Is she going to do that through an exit? Okay, well, you add 30% taxes on top of that. She's going to have to sell for $6 or $7 million. What's the company valued at currently? Is it valued at 2? All right, well, we have 10 years to grow the value of the company from 2 to 7. That level of context, nearly every entrepreneur is missing that context.
Yep. I mean,
that's what we provide.
100%, which is why I felt like this is why I wanted this conversation, because you get the luxury of speaking to 0.7% of any woman in business will build a business over 7 figures. We're not talking about profit. We're just talking about overall revenue.
I know.
So your total addressable market is 0.7% of all entrepreneurs. This podcast serves a lot more than that. So even if people are not there, how can you answer the same questions that Kaitlyn is asking those of people with larger businesses? Because we can all duplicate this model in different ways. Now, first mistake is not knowing how much they make per month. The second mistake is not understanding or knowing what has to be in place in order for it to be work optional. And the third mistake, common mistakes we see.
Another common mistake I would say is a lot of people think that a bookkeeper and a CFO is the same thing, and it's not.
Oh, we talked about this. Okay, just say more about this. This is good.
So if people are not quite ready for theory, I say hire a good CFO, because a CFO is responsible for overseeing the financial health and growth of the company. You need that position first. Well, it's a little bit of chicken and egg, because on the personal side, you need to know what the business needs to do for you. So I'll use myself as an example. I started Theory. I'm making $0, but I went, you could just go to nerdwallet.com and just type in, I want to be financially independent or retire by age 60, spending $30,000 a month. For me, I ran that calculation and it told me I was going to have to save $13,000 a month, save and invest $13,000 a month. So I was very clear from day one of running Theory, this business needs to give me $13,000 a month to save and invest.
Like beyond your living expenses.
Beyond my living expenses. But what does that inform? My pricing structure, the number of clients I take on, what I do and what I don't do, because I have that number in the back of my mind. That is my North Star. Doesn't mean I'm going to hit it tomorrow,
right?
But it is a North Star that informs so many of my other decisions. So when I hired my CFO, I said, I need to cover my living expenses and I need $13,000 a month to be going into my investment portfolio. He was able. Now, Theory has taken many iterations since I started it. When I started it, I just had this little dream that I was going to be a solopreneur and just have 40 clients. Now we have a team of 9 people. So obviously that has changed. But what has not changed? Being financially independent at age 60, spending $30,000 a month. So I go to Matt and I say, okay, I'm not a solopreneur anymore. And now I'm running a company with a team of 9 people. But that North Star is the same. And he helps me translate what does the business need to do to achieve that North Star.
Right. Okay. So I want to go back, and it's understanding how much we are spending every month to live and be very real with that. Understanding the number we would have to be able to meet in order to be work optional by a certain age or within a certain time frame.
Yes.
And then number 3, making sure that you have a team, not just a bookkeeper, but a CFO.
Yes.
So I had no idea when we really started scaling the business, getting into the digital space. So when I was a solopreneur photographer, we would run multiple 7-figure, but it was just my husband and myself. Like we were fine with the bookkeeper. We were fine with somebody filing our taxes. Then we get into the online space and things just grew really fast. We met with the CFO. He came on board and we did not know how good we had it. I just thought, well, this is what everybody does. And then he sold his book of business. And as he sold his book of business, I realized that the company that had bought his business were bookkeepers, very good at what they did, bookkeepers. They were not CFOs.
Yeah.
And so we went through a whole year and a half of waiting to be like, well, once they understand our business, then we're going to go back to what we used to get. Okay, once we pay more, then we're going to go back to what we used to get. And we just had this wake up, we're never going to get that because they're 2 entirely separate things. And so for us moving into 2026 and getting a CFO, going back to, we have a bookkeeper, we have a CFO. We're talking to a tax strategist. And for those of you guys who are interested, had a great conversation with Carlton Dennis. Be sure to check that out. We'll link it in the show notes. Now, we're here at this conversation, and this is a conversation that JD and I have. I know that it sounds awful, and I don't want to actually say it because I think that people are going to have an opinion online. And then I just realized, well, I don't care about their opinion. It's my life, and I'm sitting here with a brilliant person who could speak directly to it. So we bought this house. It was a complete fixer-upper. And we poured money into it, and I love it, Kaitlyn. The day I walked into this house and I walked through it, I cried, and it was beautiful, and it felt like a deep breath of air. And that same day, I told my husband, I see us listing the house. And he was shocked. And he's like, are you not happy? What happened? I was like, no, it's everything. It's everything we wanted. And I can't tell you, I know we're listing the house. It's in me. I already know. I am so happy. I have no ambitions to move right now, but there's a knowing in me. I know it. I feel it. And he said, okay, when I hear you talk, after our conversation, the first thing that came up was well, how do I figure out my work optional number? How do I figure out what we're going to need? Because I could tell you if all things stayed equal and we saved, if Luna wants to go to college, if we want to travel twice a year, if we want to do all these things and we come up with that number and then we change a house, that's a big change. A very big change. And I know how much we would need liquid because I know it's disgusting. I love a little chaos. I love building. I love tearing it down. I love designing. It's if it's not chaotic, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. So it's I want a new project. I already envision what the house looks like. I can see it.
Yeah.
And my husband's like, do you know how much liquid we need for building that? I was like, I know, but we'll just find another fixer-upper. So all of that to say, I know our number's changing. What do we do in the meantime?
Right. So that's a good example of you have your peaks of the mountains, right? There's multiple. And I always say between your personal life and the business and legislation, it's always fluid. It's always changing. And that's why we are your Sherpa on this journey. So what you're telling us is, okay, a peak has changed. And so we're going to change our path. And our job is to provide the context and be a sounding board to help you do that in the smartest, most effective way possible.
Can I tell you what comes up for me?
What?
Is I'm so happy that I would have somebody as a sounding board. And then there's a part of me that feels like that's like a little bit of a constraint because you would be forcing me to make a decision. You're like, Jasmine, you sell the house. And what this means is you either work another 4 years or you find a way to increase revenue so that your owner's pull every year turns into be a different number. And then I'd be like, oh, that's too much stress on the business. Do I want to work another 4 years? Like, I don't like to make decisions. I'm just like to let it be. And I think that what I've needed in my life are those constraints with the trade-offs is, are you willing to work more or radically change your income to get the outcome that you desire? And sometimes I don't know if I really want to say, I want to work more or I want to live on less.
Right. Or introduce more time. So in terms of like a goal. So
Oh, got it.
when we're talking about like work optional, for example, so you can push out the time frame, right?
Yeah.
Or you can decrease lifestyle or you can save more. So you have choices. That's why we call it modeling.
Yeah.
We're going to model different things so you can see how you feel in different scenarios. That's all we're doing is we're contextualizing for you. But ultimately, yes, previously you haven't been presented with those trade-offs, so you don't really know how you feel. You know how when you ask someone a question and you already know the answer and then they give you the other answer and you're like, that just affirmed that I want this answer?
Yes.
We're kind of doing that for you.
Yeah.
You know, right? But knowledge is power. So when you have the information, you can make an informed decision.
So I think I have just flash fire questions. I was going to do, sometimes I do, I start with a game and it's like under 60 seconds, answer these 6 questions. And I just felt like with your whole vibe and energy, I'm like, we're not playing the game. That is out of alignment. I could just feel it. So I was like, okay, we're going to can the game. Don't need to do that. But I actually want to answer these questions because I feel like it would drill down for somebody who's listening to contextualize it for them. So I don't want somebody listening to be like, well, that's a nice to have. I'm nowhere near that. Well, right. But many of us were always in that position until we were there. How do we best prepare, even if we're not at the precipice of being able to work with somebody like Theory? So true or false? If your business is profitable, you're automatically building personal wealth.
False.
Okay. Explain.
You need to give dollars a job because it's human nature that if you don't give dollars a job, they will be spent.
So when you say give dollars a job, explain it to me like I'm 5.
So let's say that it's great that you're profitable. I did notice when I first got into this space, kind of like the vanity metrics, right? It's like people talk about revenue, but revenue really does not matter. Right. Profitability matters. So what are we doing with that profitability? How is it helping us reach our goals? How is it helping us further our mission? Again, it's kind of this balance between the CFO and us. If there's a game plan and a roadmap, we're very clear on, okay, the business made $500,000 of profitability this year, and it's going here, here, and here. That's because there was a plan in place before the $500,000 was made.
Give the dollars a job.
Yes. Those dollars are going to be going towards things. That's actually what I see people miss the most is just the execution, right? So and it's funny because we see this with clients. The clients that are on a monthly savings cadence are building wealth faster and smoother than the people who say, well, let me see how the year goes. And then I'll dump money into my portfolio.
What's a general rule of thumb? Like for somebody who's listening and maybe they're not at the 7 or 8 figure mark, general rule of thumb, percentage wise, how much should somebody be saving so that they have a pathway to wealth?
I mean, automating is certainly that's one of the best things that you can do.
Is there a general rule of thumb for percentage wise? 2% every month, 10% every month. And I know it's different for everybody because most people are living paycheck to paycheck. But if there's a way for you to say, can you live a little bit less and be able to put 3% every single month automated? Have you seen a general rule of thumb or just be whatever you can, however you can?
It's a little bit of whatever you can, however you can.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could do 5%, that could be meaningful over time. So I just paid off my student loans last month. I paid them off 13 years early.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I took a 3-pronged approach. So even though I had $200,000 of student debt, I was an employee at the time. So I did a 401k. I contributed 5% of my salary to my 401k because there was a 5% match with the company. I put 5% into my savings account and then I paid down my student loans. I did that for 8 years, basically like 22 to 30. By the time I was actually 29, but by the time I was 29, that's when COVID hit. I had $70,000 in my 401k. I had $30,000 in my savings account, and my husband had built $100,000 in his 401k. So because we had been doing the slow and steady 3-pronged approach, we had built up assets by the time COVID rolled around. Well, COVID comes, they roll out the CARES Act. They say you can access your 401k without taking the 10% penalty. You can take up to a $100,000 loan against your 401k. So that's what we did. So rather than paying Navient 8% on $180,000, I liquidated my retirement account. Part of the reason why I did that is because it was the only time I was going to avoid the 10% penalty. And I was shifting from being an employee to being a business owner.
This is crazy. I didn't know this part of your story. It's freaking brilliant.
So I knew being a business owner was going to open me up to massive wealth creation vehicles in terms of like retirement savings, like solo 401ks or defined benefit plans, or like cash balance plans. So I was like, it's fine. I'll take the hit now. I'll avoid the 10% penalty. So I took the $70,000 out of my 401k, liquidated most of our savings, paid off $80,000. And then my husband took a loan against his 401k and paid off the other $100,000. So we paid off $180,000 to Navient, which we were paying 8%. And with a 401k loan, you pay yourself the interest. So rather than paying Navient 8% interest, we were paying ourselves 4.25% on $100,000.
Oh my gosh.
So we did the boring thing, right, for 8 years, just like save and invest, pay down the debt. But then COVID comes, that's a wealth building opportunity.
And you couldn't forecast it, but somebody had told me just yesterday, the quote I heard is, you're not responsible for the abundance, but you're responsible for the preparation.
Yes.
And so you just prepared for the moment. So you had the option to do something that you wouldn't have if you had not making those small steps. Those small blinds, like it's going to happen. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I hope that people hear that and they listen and they say, okay, that's the thing I'm going to do. Before I get to these big, massive things, those are gonna be things. Okay, so
yeah.
How much money should an entrepreneur have before considering to work with a financial planner?
That's a tricky one. I mean, for theory, we have people come to us who, did you say how much should they have saved?
How much should an entrepreneur have before considering working with a financial planner?
For us, $0. That's a huge thing that makes us different is we charge the flat monthly retainer. So it doesn't matter, but the traditional model.
But like you have a flat monthly retainer and let's just say, I'm not going to give like a number, but let's just say for math's sake, it's, I'm not all that great with math. $5,000 a month. Let's just say it's $5,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has a $5,000, but they, on a quarterly basis have $5,000. So they have $20,000 at the end of the year. Are you still taking them as a client? Does it really make sense?
For theory, our fee is $1,500 a month. So I would say to feel good about that energetic exchange, we like to see people able to put at least $30,000 to $50,000 a year.
Great.
Towards their financial goals. That would be a good fit for theory.
That's great. And so when you are so for people who are listening, this is really just, all I wanted to do was to go back and say, at what point in your journey, if you had heard something that you would be able to say, okay, that's the bullseye. I didn't even know what I was like saving for or aiming for. So had I heard this a decade ago, I think my life would have been really, really, really different. Because I think that the way that the model is built for somebody like me at that time. And so I made a lot of circular patterns until I came and found you and your perspective. Okay. So, should your business be your biggest retirement plan?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Explain that.
Okay. So the cornerstone of wealth preservation is diversification. So money is created through concentration. It's preserved through diversification. For entrepreneurs, they start off concentrated in their business. And that's great because concentration leads to the outsized return, right? Like high risk, high reward. That is good for a certain period of time. And that's where you can get that outsized return. But over time, we need to start to diversify away from the business.
Yep.
Because it's okay to be living and dying by business performance for the first 5, even 10 years. It's not okay to be living and dying by business performance 30, 40 years into business ownership.
I wish that 10 years ago somebody would have said that. I think that alone is so profound because, I mean, here again, don't have a history with money, have never started a business. You come into money, you think that it's going to be good and up and down, and then you just continue doing it until you don't. And then I thought to myself, well, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. So
Right.
part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation was people are watching and listening and they want to know how they turned their money into wealth. What are the small things that they could start doing? And obviously, you have built a model that's built for specific ambitious women who have a successful business. Okay, we're moving in that direction. But I want to go back and talk a little bit about the why and then the business of your business. So this podcast is literally, I could talk about business all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. So let's talk about the structure of your business, and then we'll go back and talk about, but why? Why was it created this way? Because I felt like that was super fascinating. So the structure of your business, you'd said you have 9 people. So you sit at the top, and then you have planners with their own book of clients.
So they don't necessarily have their own book of clients because we all share the clients.
Okay.
But one concept that was, I feel like I intuited, but then it was just affirmed by a friend of mine, Sarah Tacey Tangretti. She's a nervous system regulation coach or guide. She talked about the Tansgredi model, where it was scientifically proven that if a baby had parents who were supported by 2 layers of support, the baby's nervous system would be regulated. And I not only want to positively impact female entrepreneurs, but I also want to create a culture where women can thrive, whether they want to be mothers or not. And so Theory works in this model where we deliver white glove service. Our advisors work with only 40 families, which is very rare. That's like a very private wealth model. Most advisors work with like 150 to 300 clients. So each advisor is the primary on 40 households. So they're the lead. And then they have a co-lead who is also familiar with their 40 households. And then that co-lead is a lead on 40. And then they have a co-lead for their 40. So it's this model where like you can truly go on vacation. You can truly go on maternity leave. We have an advisor on maternity leave right now. I have 2 other advisors stepping in to support her households. So she can truly feel like she can step away and rest and rejuvenate. That was the culture that I wanted to build, is like when you're away, you're truly away. You're not checking your phone every 2 seconds.
And so your clients come in and your business scales when you have your advisors. And so you know that when you're going to go into like a growth season or there's like a big wave, that you have your advisors built, set up, that there is a web of support with each other. And so you've built this and you've stepped into that. But why did you leave UBS? What happened? And then why did you decide to make a decision when all systems go, you're on a very successful track? Like what happens for you to say, this is where I stop and a new part of me begins?
Well, the candid answer is I had this conscious thought that if I wanted to be successful in private wealth, I was going to have to sacrifice my safety. And I was sexually harassed starting my first week in private wealth. I was asked to take my clothes off in front of a 68-year-old advisor. So that was my first week in private wealth. And it didn't get better after that. Fortunately, he was my boyfriend at the time. He encouraged me to come forward with a claim, and I did. And fortunately, UBS ended up firing that advisor. But it was pretty relentless to be, I was in my mid-20s, and I'm surrounded by men, and I'm prospecting men because who has private wealth? Men have private wealth. And I ended up submitting 6 claims in 3 years. The first one, that was the most jarring because it was so unexpected, but about a year after, and I went through that experience and they fired the advisor, and I just stayed quiet about it for a year because I didn't want to get a reputation for being difficult to work with. And I mean, you know this about me, but I was an ice hockey player. So like I grew up in a boys' locker room. I grew up with boys like spitting where I sat. So it wasn't that I was not used to being around men or being tough, but this was different. It was like exploitative and explicit and so demeaning. So I went through that experience, and then I didn't say anything for a year because I didn't want to get a reputation for being difficult to work with. But then a year later, an assistant came to my office on a Friday afternoon, and she closed the door to my office and she said, "Hey, I heard you were the advisor that filed the complaint that got that advisor fired. And she said, I'll never be able to thank you enough because you tortured me for years. And after she said that to me, I realized like, this isn't just about me. This is about all women, protecting all women, because there are younger women coming in after me. And that assistant was 20 years older than me. So I ended up filing the rest of the complaints. And then I became a private wealth advisor, and I had a business partner who knew everything I had been through, and he still physically assaulted me on 3 different business trips. And after the 3rd business trip, I came home to my husband and I was like, I just can't do this anymore. So that's when we were living in New Orleans, and we ended up moving back up to Boston. And UBS was pretty good about it. Like I went to them and I said, you're going to pay for us to move home. You're going to pay for me to get on a new private wealth team. You're going to give me a raise. But like, honestly, I was just a shell of myself after all those experiences and what I had been through. And I did end up joining a private wealth team in the Boston office. But it felt like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, to be honest. And fortunately, that team actually ended up leaving UBS like 3 months after I joined them, and they went independent, but they opened an office on the other side of Boston. And that was like an impossible commute for me, but it got me out of UBS, which I really needed. Like I was like really suffering there. But when we made that transition, it caused me to take a step back and like really take a hard look at the industry and be like, is this what I really want to do? Because all the passion had just been stripped out of it for me. And I truly did not feel safe. I did not feel like I could. I felt like I was going to have to sacrifice my safety to be successful in that environment. And my husband was like, well, do you think if you changed who you did this for, that your passion would come back? And I said, maybe. And he was like, well, I've noticed that you love following female entrepreneurs. Like, do you think there's something that you could do with that? And then I started listing out like, here's all the things that's wrong with the model and how it works today. And he was like, well, do you think you could create a solution to that? And so I did.
Okay. To me, it's like, I just want this like, like in the crowd goes wild. Okay. And so Brene Brown calls it gold-plated grit. Years later, you could look back at that and say that was a very difficult thing. And we look, and none of us will have an understanding of the pain that you had gone through and the fear that you dwelled in. And then the voice, the courage to use your voice to speak up for other people who didn't have that. And to be the quote unquote very successful but very difficult one to work with. We will never understand any of that. And then we hear this big, bold, courageous decision. You made it to go out on your own to serve a market, and you knew what was wrong, and you said, I can fill that gap. And we hear this and we're like, hell yes, she can. Let's go. But like, now let's get to the real. You say, I think I can. Here's how the model's broken. And then you're like, I'm in business. How do you start getting clients? Like, what does that journey look like? Because making a declaration and then making it successful are 2 very different things.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of crazy to say, but I didn't even know if the business was viable, because I didn't even know if there were female entrepreneurs out there. I mean, like you said, 0.7%. The only female entrepreneurs I knew were Sarah Blakely and Jessica Alba. If you're in private wealth, those are pretty much the only 2 that you know. So I had to spend the first 18 months of theory just looking for.
So what are you doing? Like, let's get like nitty gritty. What are you on LinkedIn, Instagram? Are you searching?
I've always been highly relational, and I knew I had this like wealth of expertise, and I wanted.
Was that pun intended?
No.
I love it though. Okay, go on. Sorry.
I knew I could educate. I knew I had my knowledge, right? Like my knowledge was my big thing. So I actually started with podcasts. I took a leap of faith and I hired a podcast booking agency. And that was great because it gave me a lot of practice telling the story and explaining these concepts. The also thing that was a huge disconnect for me was like how little the layperson knew.
Yes.
It took me a long time to understand how much the general population does not know about wealth building. And so podcasts, our industry is so nebulous and so intimidating. And so podcasts gave me great practice explaining concepts in a digestible way. So I started with the podcasts, and then I actually used my intuition. I did join an online mastermind. And in that mastermind, I identified my ideal client avatar, like literally a person. I was like, this is my girl. And she is still a client today.
Oh,
And we've
wow.
helped her build multiple 7 figures net worth. She got a multi seven figure offer on her company this year, which she turned down because her company is so well run that she can get distributions off of it without really requiring much of her time at all. But she knew exactly what she needed to get for an offer because she has her financial plan.
Oh, that's amazing. So you get on podcast, you hire. So I'm looking this just as like from a marketing perspective. You have an idea, you build the business, you know the offer, but you're not exactly quite sure who that is because you don't know how big the market is and you don't actually know how to tap into this market because it's really hard to find. And like, it absolutely is hard to find. So then you get on podcast networks and then you join a mastermind where their 7-figure founders are. You meet somebody who you say, I can build my model after this person. You secure her as a client. You now have since helped her get like 8 figures for a sale that she chose. I don't really need because the business is printing me money and I don't have to do much. And then from there, how did it expand? In same ways of you just going out and networking and meeting people?
Pretty much, yeah. So theory, I mean, I've never posted on Instagram. I don't have a podcast. I don't have an email list. All I have focused on is relationship building and educating.
Wow, this is like Fight Club. Like, oh my gosh.
But that feels aligned for me. So I'm a 1-3 projector for human design. So I love intimacy. Like I love one-on-one conversations. I love presenting to a small group of entrepreneurs. I love getting live feedback. So I built theory in a way that aligns with my blueprint.
And on the back of that, knowing who you are and the type of business you want to build, you can still have like intimacy like with your advisors, and then your business continues to grow.
Yes.
As a result of that.
And one thing that's really important is right now, so we have a little over 60 clients. My goal right now is to grow to 120 clients with my existing team. I do not have to grow beyond that if I don't want to. And I'm so clear on that because of my financial plan. And the amount of discernment that gives me in terms of what I say yes to, what I say no to, and where I spend my time, like it's invaluable.
And who you say yes to.
Yes.
You get to handpick your clients.
Yes.
That is a place of power.
Yes.
And so now that you've built the business, you started and you're like, okay, if I could just get these many, like if I could just have 20 clients, and now you've expanded far beyond that and your team, does that change anything about what you see your future to be? Or has the future always been the future and now you get to do it with like a small group of people at your side? By your teammates, I mean.
Tracy Litt has a great quote. She says, expansion happens at the speed of safety. And I totally get that because especially as I was like healing from everything I went through in private wealth, I kept my vision really small. And then I started to grow. And then I was like, well, maybe I could have a team. Right now, I want to be realistic about the fact that I'm very like goal oriented. So I want to focus on this goal of getting to 120 clients and then seeing how it feels. One thing that feels very natural for me is I do feel that I am here to mentor. And so my focus right now is transferring how I think to the team, not what to do, but how I think, because I want them to advise the way that I advise, right? I'm moving into that leadership era, which is super exciting for me. And that feels very natural for me. But that took a while because a lot of my ego was wrapped up in, oh, my value is in my skill set and what I do. So I had to go through a lot of mental work to, oh no, it's actually my leadership and the systems and the framework that I've built. Like that's the value. The value is not me. The value is the framework and the results that it's getting for clients.
Can we go back to how we started the conversation? And you had said the 3 most important questions that we have to ask ourselves as 6, 7, and 8-figure founders is, where are we now? Where do we go? And how do we get there? So you had said, where are we now? 60 clients. Where do we want to go? 120. So my question to you as we close is, how are you going to get there? Like, I want you to point to the stands like Babe Ruth. Be like, this is it. This is how I see it. Are you there yet? Are you okay sharing that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have my 2026 calendar built out already. So I'm a part of 3 groups 3 networking groups, and 2 of those groups have 2 events this year, and another group has 1. And then there's like another dinner that I'm doing in Atlanta. So that's 5 or 6 events that I'm going to go to.
And 8 or 10 clients.
Mm-hmm.
Not a girl.
Mm-hmm. So simple.
That's so great.
Gives me the time to work out, spend time with my kids, just enjoy life.
And maybe this podcast. 8 or 10. 8 or 10. 8 or 10. Kaitlyn, I want people, like one of the things I was really impressed is I was like, okay, so talk to me about all of your avenues, what you want people to do. Like, Jasmine, I have a 1-page website. If people want to chat and figure out if they're a fit, you just go and book a call. Where do they go? How do they book a call? Give us the details.
Yeah, so that is correct. It's a 1-page website. It's theoryplanning.com. There's a link at the bottom to book a call with me, and I'm happy to chat to give you a gut check on where you're at in your journey and see whether it's a good fit for Theory now. Or I mean, I love to leave people with something, right? So if you book a call with me, I will tell you, what the next best step is. I
absolutely love that. And in full candor, I don't have a vested interest in how her business grows. If her business grows, it's like high-fiving all the way around, because when Kaitlyn wins, the clients win. And if you become a client, like this is the ultimate goal is how do we all collectively move upwards together? How do we create momentum? And so I brought Kaitlyn here because I wish that I had this conversation with Kaitlyn a decade ago. And because I can't, the best thing I can do is to put somebody else who's a decade prior to where I am now to build out. And so the lessons have always been, for me, I made a promise to God, whatever I learn, I'm going to share it. And so this is me taking those lessons, putting them out there. And so I hope that in the future, we can look back at this day and be like, wow, Jasmine, that you were dreaming a little too small. You were dreaming a little too small. So thank you for just being an expander, an opener, and giving people hope, but then concrete steps. These are simple things we could start doing. So you had mentioned NerdWallet. You had also mentioned Monarch, and you had also mentioned theoryplanning.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. You're the best.
Thank you for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching and listening to the Jasmine Star Show. Kaitlyn Carlson, you're the best.
Thanks, Jasmine.